Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan. Welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where today I'm going to be talking about a camera that I've had my eye on for a long time, but which I haven't yet reviewed because I simply haven't been able to find a good example. And this camera is the Olympus Flex. This particular one is the Olympus Flex 1, which dates to about 1953 or so. Now, many people aren't even aware that Olympus made a twin lens reflex or TLR camera. And that's because not so many of these were made and quite few of them were exported from Japan. And the reason that so few were made was the approach which Olympus took to manufacturing this camera. So Olympus in those days was mainly a maker of medical equipment and optical glass, as well as producing lenses for other makers. And if you look at many other cameras on the market in those days, cameras like Mamiya or Aries and a few others, you will notice that they were often fitted with Olympus Zuiko lenses. But Olympus decided to take a chance in the photography market in the early 1950s and began producing cameras. Their first one was the Olympus 35, which was a simple 35mm camera. But 35mm in those days wasn't as popular as medium format. So Olympus entered the market with a series of folding 120 cameras, which could be shot in the 6x6 and 6x4.5 format. And they also produced, in small numbers, these twin lens reflex cameras. Now, camera makers could take a couple of different approaches in the early 1950s to try to make money. They could focus on either quality or quantity. They could focus on making a very high quality camera which cost a lot of money but which had a large profit margin, or they could focus on making larger numbers of smaller, less expensive cameras and with less profit and just making money by making lots of them. In the case of their twin lens reflex cameras, Olympus went and took the quality approach. And if you look at this camera, if you handle it, if you realize all the features and all the work which went into engineering this, you realize this is a very high quality camera. This camera sold for close to 30,000 yen in the early 1950s, and when your average Japanese person in those days was making 7,000 yen per month, that was a hell of a lot of money, which is why so few of these were made. Most of these were sold in Japan, a few were exported, but not very many. One thing which made this camera stand out above the other competition was its lens. And as Olympus was a maker of lenses mainly in those days, they decided to make a very special lens for this camera. And what they came up with was this here. This was the Zuiko f2.8 75mm lens. Now, Zuiko is what all Olympus lenses are called, even to this day. And the F, the letter, that denotes the number of elements in the lens. A would be 1, B would be 2, C would be 3. Most other makers in the early 1950s of twin lens reflex cameras used triplet lenses. That is, lenses which had 3 elements. And some of the more sophisticated ones might use 4 or 5 element lenses. This is the F Zuiko lens, so it's a 6-element lens. So this was the most sophisticated lens ever put in a twin lens reflex camera. I guess I can probably say ever. Because I can't think of any other camera which was fitted with that. Even the more, the later cameras like the Mamiya Flex with Tessars and things like that, those weren't 6-element lenses. So a phenomenal lens design in this camera. The unfortunate thing about this lens is that it's very expensive to produce. A larger aperture lens, especially in the early 1950s. And this added a lot of money to the price tag of the camera. The problem that we have with large aperture lenses, and what I mean by aperture is I mean the amount that the aperture opens. So inside the lens there are aperture blades which open and close, and that regulates the amount of light which goes through when the shutter opens. Now, larger aperture lenses allow more light to go through, and the advantage of them means that you can shoot in situations where there's less light, or there's the same amount of light, but you can use a faster shutter speed. So they're better for low light photography, and they're better for capturing action. Unfortunately, the issue with these cameras and all glass lenses is there's kind of a prismatic effect when light goes through a lens. And of course, I'm sure everyone has played with a prism, and the light shines through the prism and it leaves a bunch of bars of different colors, rainbow colors, which look very beautiful. But in the case of a camera lens, you don't want that to happen. You want to have all the cameras on the exact same line. and that would be the film plane or the digital sensor in your digital camera. And the larger the aperture of the lens, the more difficult it is to get the colors to line up on that single plane. And in order to do so, that requires a more sophisticated lens design, higher quality glass, and more exotic lens coatings. And Olympus was able to accomplish that, and the photographs you can take with one of these cameras, if you find one with a good lens without any haze in it, they're simply quite amazing. But as I said, not too many of these were made. Olympus eventually moved to a less expensive and simpler design in their 3.5 models, which came out around 1955 or so. And by that time, medium format was being removed from its, I guess, spot at the top of the mountain by 35 millimeter film, and eventually the Olympus Flex and Olympus's other 120 medium format cameras went extinct, and they focused almost entirely on 35 millimeter and smaller formats. So let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the Olympus Flex, and I'm sure you'll be interested in some of the things which this camera offers which weren't available by other makers at the time. Starting at the top, you start to notice a few differences right away. This looks like the top of any, like any other TLR camera of the time, but the first thing I noticed is it actually has screws which are used to assemble and put on the cover, this is the only camera which I've seen like that. Most camera makers simply put in a pin and stamped it on either side, kind of like riveting it into place, which makes it not serviceable. If you have the lens hood damaged on the top, you have to replace the entire thing, where if you can remove the hardware, you can simply replace the basic parts. Another thing is this camera features a catch which locks the lens hood in place, whereas other makers, you simply pull up on the lens hood to open it. So the catch is a pretty good additional feature. Another feature is this lever which you have to use to open the focusing loop, and that prevents you from accidentally opening it. A problem that some people have when they close these too quickly or aren't paying attention is that this focusing loop is left open, and when you try to close it, it can damage, bend and damage, and it doesn't line up properly, and it's kind of difficult to get it back into its proper place. This design kind of minimizes, it doesn't completely remove the chances of that happening, but it does reduce them. This camera, of course, features a sports finder, which you activate by pushing this front panel down, and you can see the rear opening for the sports finder here. When you're using the sports finder with these cameras, if it's the Olympus Flex or any other TLR camera, you operate it with the camera focus to infinity. And that way, all you have to do is you don't have to focus the camera, you just have to look through the finder. And most sports activities, if it's baseball or football or track and field or whatever, you're going to be far away from the action anyway, usually. So it's quite fine to have the camera focused at infinity in those situations. And to close the sports finder, you simply push on the button back here, and it pops and closed like that. Now, this is the Type 1 version, the early model, the earliest of the early models, and there was the early model. Featured a mirror on the inside of the sports finder, and what this allowed you to do was to use the focusing hood like a prism, similar to some of the early Rolleiflex cameras. And this way you could not only look through the sports finder, but you could actually see what was on the focusing screen, and you could focus, which allowed you to take action photos more close than infinity focus. Unfortunately for Olympus, Rollei had patented this design, and Olympus was forced to stop manufacturing it. On the right side of the camera, we have the basic controls, which are similar to other TLR cameras of the time. We have the focusing knob here, and we have a dial on the outside, which you use to set your film speed. This doesn't have any effect on the function of the camera. This is just to remind you what film you have loaded. Many people had more than one camera, and pros would sometimes have 2 or 3 cameras loaded with 2 or 3 of the same camera, but loaded with different kinds of film, with color, black and white, 100 speed or 400 speed. And this just lets you know what film you have loaded in your camera. If you shoot only one camera and use only one kind of film, this is completely irrelevant. On the winding knob here, normally there's a reminder dial here, which is used to remind you what kind of film you have in the camera, if it's color or black and white, or if the camera is empty. Sorry for the coughing, I have allergies in this season. And over here we have the film counter window. And the film counter windows weren't exactly common in the early 1950s. Many twin lens reflex cameras simply had a window on the back. It was very cheap and simple. Olympus took the extra step to add a mechanical film counter to this camera. On this side here we have two lugs on this side. We have the strap lugs on the top here, and the good thing about these strap lugs compared to others is they're big. So you can use any kind of strap on this camera. You don't have to use a twin lens or TLR specific strap, which you have to use on some of the other ones. The second lug here on the bottom was for attaching a flash bracket, which Olympus sold as an accessory for these cameras. And the flash sync socket is located on the front. This is the old Kodak style, which you have to push in the plug and turn it to lock it in place. You can use a more modern flash on this by simply using a PC adapter. The front of the camera, of course, has the important controls on it. You have the shutter speed dial here on the right side. There are numbers on here showing the shutter speeds, and you simply line them up with a little painted mark on the top. And of course, you have the aperture dial on this side, and it operates the same way. We have the shutter charging lever here on the left side, and we have the shutter release button here on this side. Cool thing about this camera is that it uses a standard cable release, which just threads right in, so you don't need it. And also the location of the controls. You can wind and shoot like that. Most TLR cameras have the controls on the same side, which means it would require an extra step moving your hand from one place to the other in order to operate the camera. This makes the camera faster and easier to operate. And here we have a locking lever for locking the film shutter button. There's also a shutter lock on this side. So if you have one of these cameras and you've been trying to get the shutter to work and it won't work, make sure that you have the dial on this side set to D, and that allows the shutter to operate. On the bottom here we have a tripod socket, and this one has an insert in it. So this was either originally a 3/8 socket and someone added this 1/4-inch adapter, or this 1/4-inch adapter was from the factory. I'm not sure which. Earlier tripods featured, because earlier cameras were heavier, they were usually medium or large format cameras, so they usually featured a 3/8 socket. But any 3/8 socket can be converted to 1/4-inch by simply using one of these adapters. Loading the film is simple. You turn this dial to the side, or this lever to the side. It has an arrow showing which way to go. We have this cool aluminum catch here, which actually has a piece of leather in the center, which is something I haven't seen on a camera like this before. And the film door opens like so. Now, loading the film in the camera is quite easy. You simply, there's a take-up spool in the camera. You would take the take-up spool, and I'll try to put it in here. Hopefully I can do it and still hold the camera where it's visible to the camera I'm using to shoot the video. So you would put your film spool in the bottom and make sure that the film is loaded so that when you pull the film across the back, that the backing paper, the back of the backing paper is showing. The backing paper, which should be showing, should show the name brand of the film and the color, if it's color black and white or what speed and all that. 120 film can be loaded two different ways. It depends on the design of the camera and the design of the film holder. In this particular, in most TLR cameras, you want it with the brand name facing out. You take the end of the paper leader and you put it into the slot here, and then you simply turn. And I always put my finger on the paper like so to make sure that it's tight around the slot. That way it doesn't pull loose and it's actually winding the film instead of just turning and the film not winding. And you keep winding until the arrow, the alignment arrow on the back of the film shows up, and you line it up between these two arrow marks on the back of the chamber here, and then you would close the film door, make sure the latch is set down, and then push the lever in the opposite direction of the arrow. And then you would wind the knob here until the number 1 shows up in the window. Another thing here, this has another Rolleiflex kind of feature, which allows you to take off the film back. You lift this up, and if you pull that the door open, you can remove it completely. And this is a feature which comes on cameras, which allows you to use sheet film backs, which were actually a thing for twin lens reflex cameras back in the late 40s, early 1950s. They're kind of hard to find nowadays and no one messes with them, but at least that was an option available for this camera. Another cool thing that this camera has, which I I think people should pay attention to is an exposure card on the back. And this exposure card is kind of based around ISO 50 film, which was a standard film in the 1950s. And what this has is it has a series of months on here and a series of situations. For example, sunlight, clouds, tree shade, beaches, things like that. And it gives you suggested settings for your aperture and shutter speed using this little table here. Now, this is an important thing to understand if you like photography, because if you're going to take good pictures, it's a good idea to understand the mechanics of how it works, like what ISO means and how an aperture system works and how the aperture and shutter speed regulate the amount of light which go on the film. And with cards like this, if you go over this, you can kind of intuitively understand how it works. And not only is this useful for these old cameras which don't have any electronics on them, it also helps you understand how modern digital cameras work, because digital cameras, of course, follow the same principle. So basically, ISO is quite simple to explain. If you have the camera set at something which is in sunlight, at the aperture set at f16, then the ISO would be whichever light gave you the correct exposure. So that would be 100 for 100 speed film, 400 for 400 speed film, or 8 or 1600. And this also applies to digital sensors when you set the ISO setting in your digital camera, or when your digital camera selects it automatically. Now, the thing about photography, especially people who take photography more as a serious art than a hobby, is being able to have more control over your photographs. And sometimes you want more exposure or you want less exposure. You want the shadows darker or you want brighter things to look brighter. And understanding how exposure works allows you to do this in both film cameras and even in more modern digital cameras. So a very useful thing to have. The chart which comes on these is quite interesting. The other early Olympus cameras, the Olympus 35, the S versions, which came out in the mid-50s, have the same kind of system, but kind of set up in a circle, which you can kind of use as a computer. And these are really cool. And you can find these examples of these on the internet. And if you're really into photography as an art, I would recommend studying how this system works. But anyway, my voice is getting a little bit tired, and I have a little bit of allergies because this is Hanami season. Unfortunately, Hanami season was mostly a washout this year because of all the rain and cold that we've had. Today is finally a sunny day for a change, and I plan to go out and ride my bicycle soon to get a little bit of sun. So that's going to be it for this video. I do have a couple more videos in the works if you'd like to see those. I've got, I'm going to be doing a camera on the series of Konica Pearl medium format cameras. These have been very popular in my store recently, and people have been asking me a lot of questions on them, so I thought I would do a video comparing the various models of the Pearl cameras. And also I plan to do a video this weekend which is not related to photography, but which is related to things which are going on here in Tokyo and in Japan. And for those of people who are interested in Japan and might be thinking of coming here, this video will have some useful information that maybe you should know. So if you'd like to see these, please subscribe or come back. If you like the video, please click the like button. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.